to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Talent Optimization, Creating Your Dream Teams. And we are thrilled to have Becca Peterson with us today. And Becca is an account executive with QPS. And if you've listened to our last episodes, you've probably heard me brag about her a little bit because I've worked with Becca for quite some time now on really getting the right people into the right roles. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So with that being said, Becca, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm so excited to be here.
Thanks. So question for you. When we think about, bringing a new person into an organization, what's the first thing that comes across your mind?
Oh man, it's all about finding that right person. It's all about fit.
So what does fit mean to you?
Sitting in kind of when I hear from executive, levels of companies, that's not always their first priority, right? So oftentimes at that executive level, it's speed that they want. They know the pain that could happen as a result of having a position open for too long, having a position vacant, not having the ability for the new person to train with the outgoing person that may be retiring. So unfortunately, fit can kind of go on the back burner to other priorities, such as speed. Whereas like working with hiring managers, that is more of a focus fit because they can kind of see all those cogs and are working together of the new person and, hey, how is this new person going to fit, with our current talent? And I think fit is just really what drives the candidate, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying to find out what motivates them.
Right. And it's those behavioral drives, right? Like, hey, are you driven in a very, very fast-paced environment, or do you really need kind of a room that is by yourself where you have silence to work? Because if you're going to put somebody in the middle of a call center and they really need that silent place to work, they're not going to be successful.
Absolutely. I know in my own career, I was in a job a lot of years ago where I kind of had to be at the office from 8 to 5. And I hadn't had a job like that in a lot of years. And I felt a little trapped. I like having a lot of variety in my roles, talking to a lot of different people. So yeah, I can personally relate to maybe being in the wrong type of job.
Right. Absolutely. And so we've got a couple things here with fit, right? So we have fit to role, and we know that fit to role is the number one driver of disengagement and really the number one driver of turnover is somebody's not in the right role. That second driver of disengagement or turnover is fit with manager. A manager is not leading them the way that they need to be led. The third is the team and the fourth is the culture, right? So when we look at all those things, what specifically does, an HR person or an executive that's sitting here saying, hey, I've got to bring individuals into my organization. And I know, what we need, speed's a factor, but hey, if we say we're only going to hire specifically from individuals that we serve and our own network, meaning we're no longer allowed to post for a job. And I know that that's how you do business, Becca. How does that change everything?
Yeah. So job postings I see as a little bit of a reactive way to find talent. At QPS, we call it post and pray, right? So with that method, you're not utilizing your network. You're kind of going outside of your network and saying, hey, world, who's out there that checks off all these different boxes on my job description? And that's really all you care about is fulfilling as many points on your job description as possible, right? Because you think that's what's going to make the person the most successful and maybe the less likely to make mistakes. But when you're hiring in your network, you're relying on people that know you and know your company and your culture and can kind of vouch for the fact that, man, this person really just seems to be a match with, your organization and what drives your organization. And that type of hire is really going to impact their success in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And, kind of going back to that post and pray versus, hey, we're going to create that network and we're going to ensure that the individuals that are in that network, we're really doing that to say, are they a cultural fit with our organization? Because if we're kind of fishing from our network, so to say, we're very specifically curating that network to say, we're going to attract those individuals that
Exactly.
like us, that are a fit with our culture. And that's why also our number one referral source is our own employees.
Absolutely. So super important within your company to use that referral source and get the word out, promoting from within, right? So taking a look at who's within your organization first before you go outside to your network. And then lastly, to job boards. But I think most importantly, it's an employer knowing and being able to articulate why work here. So the hiring manager needs to know, hey, why do I work here? And be able to really articulate that to attract that talent. And if you don't have, we call it at QPS, the employee value proposition. We try to identify it for candidates that are working out on the plant floor, and then also use it with candidates through upper management to get that talent in the door. And it really is a lot more, companies used to tell me years ago, well, we have really great benefits. We have to dive a lot deeper than that these days, right? So
absolutely.
Pretty much everyone's offering health insurance, but what makes your benefits different? And I think that's where employers really need to kind of take an honest look. Some kind of differentiators could be like tuition reimbursement, volunteered time off. I think right now with COVID, we're all taking kind of a look at what's really important in our lives. And so it's important to find employer that kind of matches those values.
Because this is all over the board, right? Like what's important to one person is not going to be what's important to the next. And if we make assumptions, well, we all know what assumptions do, right? They're not good for anybody.
Right. Yeah, very true.
When we're creating those employee value propositions, for specifically looking at that for a company, what are some of those key things that you ask about or that you dig into to really figure out what's important for the company so that you can then market that in a way that's really to your network, right? Because we're not putting it to job boards. We're going to our network and saying, hey, you have these needs and it matches what this company has. Maybe we've got a match here.
Absolutely. So on the employer side, it's knowing, and then also for QPS, understanding what are their non-negotiables on the job description. So really a job description, we look at it kind of as their wish list. If you're going out and doing a house search, right? Well, maybe you want that 3,000 square feet and you want 3 bathrooms and you really love an eat-in kitchen. But depending on the market, right, you might not find all of those things if it's a really tight housing market. Employment market's kind of the same way. You might have a really long wish list of like, oh, I want to check all these boxes, but that talent might not be out there.
Yeah. And if you listen to our last episode, we talked with Candy Underwood, who is the HR leader at QPS. And one of the key things she stated is, hey, internally, it's top 3. And we really need to make sure that we calibrate what those top 3 needs are within the leaders that are leading this specific individual. So we know what are the outcomes that this job needs to produce. And now we can back that in so that we're really specific on what that is. And again, right now, the job market's tough with COVID. We know that there's a lot of things that have changed with that. So when we have great clarity over why this organization is a great organization to work at, I think we're much better apt to attract that right person.
Absolutely. Because, most candidates are sitting on a number of different options when they're looking at employers. They're going and doing as many interviews as they can. They might have 3 offers on the table. We try to do our best job to present our candidates with multiple options so that they can pick that top option. And it could be something as little as the paid time off, that pushes the employee in that direction towards that company. I am working with some employers who have very set programs with very set pay rates for higher salaried positions. And it really pigeonholes them, and it makes it hard for them to attract that top talent because, if someone's in a role where they're making $35 an hour and their skills justify it, they're not going to take a set 29 wage.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes to what is that pay range that individuals are in. And I think that, hey, we've got to set ourselves up for success as an employer to say, hey, these are some of the key things that we can control. So sometimes there's uncontrollables, which may or may not be budget, but we also need to understand what is the cost of a bad hire in our organization. And if our key thing we're looking at is speed, we're setting ourselves up for failure before we've even opened the door.
That is so true. Exactly. And like you said, going back to fit, right? Finding that person that is going to be a long-term fit with your culture and your company's values.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so curious about this employee value proposition that we talked about. And as we dig into creating that, because for many of our listeners, I think that this is something that is new, right? A lot of our HR folks that are just used to posting on job boards versus saying, hey, let's flip this thing on its head. If we can only hire from our current customer base, if we can only hire specifically looking at who our current employees are and referrals from that, how will that make us think about hiring differently? So what are some of those key things when you create this and do this with clients that are kind of those ahas or a story about how that EVP, employee value proposition, created an amazing outcome for you?
Yeah. So, I think there's a lot of uncertainty for people right now, and they're valuing things like furthering their education, right? So like we had talked about earlier, when it gets deeper than the good health insurance benefits, we have some employers that are paying 100% of the employee's health insurance premium. When you put $1 behind the cost of that program, it could be, almost 5% more money than they would be able to get somewhere else. Tuition reimbursement, work from home options are definitely, an employer being able to offer that flexibility and kind of seeing outside the traditional means of everyone had to go to work from 8 to 5, right? Utilizing that technology and being able to offer the flexibility to, hey, after 3 months of training in the office, we're really confident with each other. We'll set you up a station that you can work from home at our cost, right? The company is going to pay for the equipment to set the person up to work from home and, be able to go pick their kids up from 3:00 at school. So kind of, thinking outside the box and offering benefits that are really 2021 benefits. These aren't things that we've ever seen before, right, Tracy? So
Right.
just kind of, we continually have to adapt and make changes daily. And it might not be the way that we used to do things. Discretionary bonuses are also great if a company can speak to, even through a tough year last year, we were able to bonus out twice in 2020. And we anticipate that happening again in 2021. So sharing those successes and being able to tell your company's story and kind of how you've survived and thrived is huge, because people do want that stability and they want to know that you're going to be here next year.
Right. And those stories are key. I mean, because recruitment and hiring and even so much of HR is marketing, right? I mean, we really are marketing. And for our executives listening in, those stories mean so much to your staff. Just that call to say, hey, how are things going? That's a 2-minute call, right? I had a conversation with my administrative coordinator today, and she just said to me, she's like, thank you for spending that half an hour with me once a week, just so I know where we're going and what that vision is. That, to me, keeps me engaged in what's specifically going on in a virtual environment. And those touches are many times the things that keep individuals in your organization, even when they get offers for more money somewhere else. And I think that those are things that we really need to pay close attention to as we're looking at, hey, what's important? The other thing I want to point out is that we have an organizational definition for many of these things. So for example, what does flexibility really mean? And what we see so often when we're hiring individuals, or looking at individuals, and I'm guessing, Becca, you can talk about this much better than I can from where we sit, but with our clients is, hey, we believe flexibility means X, Y, and Z. But yet an employee may think that it means something completely different that doesn't align with the culture. And we have to be really clear on what our boundaries and expectations are by defining what that specifically is. And part of, I think, what this employee value proposition does is it names, why is this such a great place to work? in the words of our own employees. And whether that's through video, whether that is through, different blurbs or almost testimonials, because guess what? I can go jump on Glassdoor and see what your organization is all about. And you know what? If you as an executive or HR haven't been on Glassdoor yet and look to see what your former staff are saying about you, like if this is the only takeaway from this episode, please go do that.
Totally. Yeah, we encourage our clients when we sit down and do quarterly business reviews, we do a social media kind of summary for them. And we look at Facebook, Indeed, Glassdoor, Google. And oftentimes, sadly, a company might have like 3 out of 5 stars on Google. And it's only because a truck driver was sitting at their dock for longer than they would have liked, right?
Right.
So we can kind of impact some of the way, that we look as a company online just by being more proactive and kind of promoting, a better image, like the true image of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And that authenticity is so incredibly important. Is individuals want to know, am I going to work for a company that's real, that's telling me the truth and that's transparent, or am I not? And when we can be really clear up front about what that is, we don't have the bait and switch that sometimes happens. We want to tell a true story. And if your culture isn't where you want your culture to be in 3 years, don't lie about what your culture is today. Take the time to improve it. But then you need to grow your people and your leadership with it.
Yep. And like you said, the employee value proposition, it not only kind of communicates, hey, this is what we expect of you, but it's what that employee can expect of the employer. That's important to kind of know because it is a two-way street. It really needs to be, like you said, a trusting relationship. So
absolutely
be transparent on the front end when you're hiring that person in, set those expectations, and then you're going to get off to a smoother start as opposed to overselling and under delivering. You don't want to do that. So yeah, it's important to let the candidates know exactly what they're signing up for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So a quick question. So as we wrap this up, Becca, one question, it's actually 2 questions, okay? But 2 questions we ask every one of our guests is, what is one key actionable takeaway for executives listening in on how do you hire the best people?
Yeah, so I'd say for the C-suite level, it's just knowing what's your story in your organization, and are your hiring managers telling it, right? Is it important to them? What can you do to make it important to them?
Absolutely, because they have to feel it. Like if they don't feel it, they can't sell it, right? And what about for HR folks? So for our HR business partners and our HR managers and directors listening in, what's one actionable takeaway that they can implement based on our conversation?
So from my experience, HR managers are heroes, right? But they can also tend to be very optimistic. We always see like what it could be, but the question is, what is it now, right? Because that's what the new employee is going to be walking into. So is your employment pitch honest? Is your employment pitch for your company, your selling points, are they reflective of what your company is offering right now? So just be honest with yourself and identify what those selling points really are and keep working towards what you want them to be.
Absolutely. That's such great insight. So if you want to hear more from Becca, Becca will be with us on our Talent Optimization Foundation webinar. So we host webinars the second and the fourth Monday of the month. And then the first and third Monday of the month, we always offer office hours. So if you're interested in hearing the step-by-step of how to create an EVP inside of your organization, we will be doing that on Monday. So please be sure to join our Talent Optimization Foundation program, and you will find that link in our show notes. So with that, thanks so much for joining us. And, stay on deck for our next 4 episodes, which are all about orientation and onboarding of new staff and those perspectives specifically from the C-suite and from HR folks that are doing the day-to-day work with that. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.